Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. I'm not satisfied when I learn something new unless I share it forward. And so we created this podcast to continue that, to share forward the wonderful people we get to meet and most importantly get to learn from and make our lives richer and better. Together we'll cover the human experience, and for me the human experience is foundational in the idea of relationships. The topics will be far-reaching, but common element you'll see here is it's all about relationships. So I invite you to join us on this journey. Come experience it with us, share your thoughts and ideas, and become part of our community. We'd love to have you. Give you a little bit of background of why we're here. It was at the very beginning of COVID that we weren't sure how to respond, but we had very real sense of how we were feeling being here in the New York area, and we started on this journey of writing a letter to our customers, who we now refer to and feel more as a community. And so we started what we call the Celebrations Pulse. That's our weekly newsletter that we write what's going on, what we're feeling, what's on the calendar, how should we be interpreting what's going on around us. And now we're launching Celebrations Chatter, which is just a podcast extension of that same work we do in creating the Pulse, but now in a video audio form in our podcast to share that same information, maybe dive a little deeper. But this is all my effort to share forward. I get so excited about the people we get to interact with here at Flowers and in our other business efforts. And I just don't feel it's done until I've shared it, whether it's with my family or with my colleagues here at Flowers. If I learn something, I want to share it. And now we want to continue that journey in our podcast, video cast here with Celebrations Chatter. So come experience it with us, share your thoughts and ideas, and become part of our community. We'd love to have you.
Today's guest on Celebrations Chatter is Ashley Hunter, the founding partner of A. Hunter & Company, an international advisory firm focused on risk management, insurance, and alternative risk transfer. Through her business, Ashley works with sovereign wealth funds, family offices, and corporations to address their complex risk management needs. Ashley has spent most of her career in the reinsurance industry, working at State Farm, AIG, and the Hartford Insurance Group before founding her own company, HM Risk Group. Risk management isn't her only passion, however. Ashley is also an accomplished concert violinist, having performed with the New York Philharmonic, the London Philharmonic, and the Dallas Symphony. In fact, she studied music theory and composition at Centenary College of Louisiana before completing an MBA in finance from Texas A&M University. Ashley frequently contributes to many global publications on the topics of risk and the implications on emerging markets, as well as doing so as a speaker and panelist. She has been a lecturer at the University of Texas at Austin School of Information since 2015, where she is teaching the next generation of leaders in risk management and cyber liability. Let's learn how Ashley shares it forward on this episode of Celebrations Chatter.
So I'm here today with a COVID buddy of mine, although we've ruined it. Ashley Hunter is a very accomplished entrepreneur, person, professional, musician, so accomplished in so many ways. And you and I have been COVID buddies until we ruined it a couple of months ago when we actually met in person. And now I don't even like you that much anymore.
I know. It was so much better when we only were able to see each other via Zoom.
I'm so excited to introduce you and the story that I've come to know that is you to our community. Ashley, let me start with some background information on you, if we could. You were born a small child where?
I'm from Dallas, Texas, to two parents that are from East Texas. So they moved to the big bustling city of Dallas, after university. And so, yes, I spent my entire formative years in Dallas.
And what part of Dallas?
I'm actually from Oak Cliff, which is now just kind of like the hub of where all of like new artists. It's kind of, I guess, like the Brooklyn of Texas. So yeah, of Dallas.
The Brooklyn of Dallas. Dallas is always has a fond part of my heart because in the very beginning days of 1-800-Flowers, it was located there in Dallas. So I commuted there for something approaching 2 years and had a good friend and partner, a fellow named Jim Pogue there. And we had some great adventures and great experiences. And then eventually we moved it, what was left of it, back to New York. But I always thought Dallas was a can-do kind of city. Nice people, good positive attitudes, made lots of friends there in that short period of time that are still friends today. So I'm very fortunate. So where did you go to school, Ashley?
So I went to undergrad at Centenary College of Louisiana. It's in Shreveport. It's a small liberal arts school, and I went there mainly because there was a formidable violinist who was teaching there for 2 years. So for 2 years, I actually managed to study it privately under this violinist, and it was amazing. And then I went to graduate school because my dad told me that I needed to get a real job because while getting a music degree was awesome, he was like, you're going to need to pay your bills. So then I ended up getting an MBA from Texas A&M. So,
which is interesting because I think now you do some teaching at the University of Texas there in Austin. I'm surprised they let an Aggie in.
Trust me, I am surprised daily, and they remind me daily that how lucky I should be that I'm able to teach at the University of Texas.
Well, you jumped the gun on us there. One of the things that I think is interesting is, yes, you're an entrepreneur, but before that, you worked in big business. I mean, among the biggest, you worked at AIG in the insurance area. You worked for them domestically and then internationally. We'll come back to that. And then after you leave AIG, you set up your own business in the insurance broking world, where you develop a couple of specialties that we'll talk about that I think are interesting, and how you came to find those areas of specialization, I think is interesting. But in between your regular big-time Fortune 50 experience with AIG and now your entrepreneurial experience in the insurance business, and you recently started a new company in the insurance space, in the reinsurance space. Oh, and by the way, as you said, you had a music degree undergraduate, studied with some pretty renowned people, and became really accomplished violinist yourself, so much so that you played both with the New York Philharmonic and with the London Philharmonic. And I think that's nothing short of amazing.
Yes. And I started out with the Dallas Symphony. So my private teacher, Show Pelletier, who's still at the Dallas Symphony. God bless her. She was the one that kept me on the straight and narrow and would just go, I'm sure, Ashley, you hear that this entire phrase is completely out of tune and out of sync. So it was, thanks to her, I was able to just understand the process of auditioning for symphonies, what that looked like, and just getting introduced to it. But yeah, it's definitely very part-time now just because of my other interest in the insurance.
Isn't that great that you can keep up your skills so much so that you can do, what would it be called, a fill-in, where you do a week or two with those different orchestras? I think that's amazing. Now, growing up, your parents pressed you to have a variety of interests. Were you also an athlete?
No. You definitely would not want me on your teams of anything. I was definitely an athlete of music, but my dad grew up playing football in high school, so I came from very athletic parents. My brother was a golfer. I did not get that gene at all.
Did you participate?
I did participate. Just, like every parent, they stick you in little league soccer, little league basketball. I did all of that. Just none of it ever stuck. But what did stick was the Suzuki and violin. So, I mean, I started playing the violin at 5 and didn't stop. So, while my brother was actually very athletic, that was a gene I did not get. My sister also did not get the athletic gene.
So there are 3 of you?
Yes, yes.
And where are you in the birth order?
I'm the oldest.
Uh-huh.
And the other 2 will tell you I am the oldest because they're like, you're not our mother.
Yes, those of us who are oldest understand that comment.
Yes.
So 5 years old, you start playing the violin. Either of your parents musicians?
No, my mother grew up playing the piano, but it was just one of those things where it's just like, oh, there's a piano at home, so you should learn to play at least a couple of scales. So my mother could play, but at this point, she cannot play with me, which she's fine with.
Yep. So you picked your college because of your passion for the violin?
Yes. It was very much it was a relationship between the private teacher at the college and the fact that I wanted to study a very specific and niche part of music. So I have a music theory degree and composition, and there are very few programs in the country that offer that. And this was one of the programs that did offer it. Plus, it had an amazing violinist on staff.
So today you have a couple of different businesses going. How often would you pick up your violin?
So I pick it up probably once a month, or I play the piano. So I can at least that's easier to pull out sometimes.
Yes.
Because having to drag my violin out sometimes is a bit of a pain, but as long as I'm still training my ear to tunes and chords, there's always ear training that can be done. So I do continue to do that.
And are you playing things on the piano that you would play on the same compositions?
Yes. So your typical Bach sonata, same thing, and nothing changes. It's just kind of the same thing, except I'm just playing it on the piano.
Any other instruments?
No. You would not want me attempting to play anything else.
But I didn't know about the piano until today, which is nice.
Yes.
So you and I met because you participated in a Women in Worth program that Juliet Scott Croxford, who at that time was the CEO of Worth Media, developed and grew. And you continue to be involved in that program. And I think it's an amazing program. I know being involved around the periphery, I've met, a couple of handfuls of people that are just extraordinary and fun, and people that are valuable contributors to my life now, just by bumping into them through that program, like you. And so tell me about how you got involved in the program, and are you still involved? I think you just did something with Women in Worth, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I am still involved. It's an excellent program. We have a mutual friend that actually made the introduction, Allison Gross, from the reinsurance world. And it was one of those things where I was just looking for engagement with other entrepreneurs. I'm sure you know this. Once you're just kind of in the weeds, it's very difficult to get outside of the weeds of your business and meet other people that could complement what you're doing. So it was actually nice. I was able to participate. I've sat on a couple of panels for the Women in Worth conferences. And from that, I've actually made a couple of really good friends, Juliet, of course, being one of them. But yes, thanks to Juliet and yourself for creating such an amazing community.
And you mentioned, you once told me a story about our mutual friend, Allison Gross, who I knew from when Allison was running all of our events at Willis and then Willis Towers Watson. And now that she has her own company, so we're still in touch. And she's an event and conference producer extraordinaire. But tell us about the time that you first met Allison. I think it was in some pretty exotic location.
Yeah, well, that's what I tell people. I'm like, you have to put insurance and reinsurance people in exotic locations, otherwise no one will show up. So it's like, if it's in New York, you may or may get a handful of people. If you stick that same conference in Monte Carlo, everyone will show up. So
So you had your insurance, you had your own insurance business at this time, and you go to the reinsurance event that is held annually in Monte Carlo, and
we were just kind of in a room mingling with other women in the reinsurance space. As I'm sure you know, there are very few of us in the reinsurance space. And I kind of stand out in a room, mainly because I'm from the South. And and my accent really precedes me when I open up. And Allison was just like, who is the random lady from the South that's sitting over here? And so we struck up a conversation, and that was like 6 years ago. But then that,
the South too.
yes, from the south of England.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So it kind of worked where we had a nice synergy. And because, when you're in the reinsurance business and you're a woman, you really need to support each other. And we just became very good friends 6 years ago. And she was talking to me about women in worth and made the introduction to Juliet. And then Juliet made the introduction to yourself. So yeah, it was meant to be, as my grandmother would say.
Uh-huh. And tell me about how did you wind up in the insurance business in the first place? I think it's a terrific career choice, and I found, with my having had the opportunity to get to know a little bit about the insurance industry, serving on the board of Willis and then Willis Towers Watson for a combination of close to 15 years, I think. I just think that it's an extraordinary, interesting career. It's slightly different than Wall Street, which attracts a lot of people, of course, because you can make an outsized amount of money on Wall Street with very little capital at risk versus other industries. Although obviously software and a few other industries have been challenging it in the last decade or two. But I still think it's an interesting career. I think it's an interesting opportunity. And I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about reinsurance, because now you know both very well. And I've been, young people that I come across who are looking for, what kind of industry should I look at? I always tell them to look at insurance and reinsurance, especially if they have a personality that can be interpreted as good for a service industry, where you try and get to understand the client, their needs, and have a passion for finding products and services that can help solve those needs, and you get paid handsomely, and you can have long careers. Wall Street often will be short burst careers. You don't find the oldest people in investment banking or some of the other areas of Wall Street brokering, trading, because they burn out kind of quickly. But insurance, it's all built on serving relationships and having the right products available. And some of these people have amazingly good and long careers. How did your career start in insurance?
Oh, well, actually, it was kind of it wasn't really planned, obviously, right? Because I thought I was going to take the actual more music route. I thought I was going to be a performer. And it wasn't until I went to graduate school and it was a recruiting event. And to your point, everyone was lined up to speak to Goldman. Everyone wanted to talk to PwC, BCG. And I was just kind of like, okay, do I want to burn out at the Goldmans of the world? And AIG was sitting over there, and quite honestly, no one wanted to talk to them.
Interesting.
So they were standing there. It was a couple of other insurance companies, but at the time, everyone knew who AIG was. But everyone was just like, that's not a sexy business. Because historically, insurance isn't the sexy business. Everyone wants to go into investment banking. So I had a conversation with them. And pretty much they sold me the same way that you're selling. You're reselling me on the insurance business. You can have a very long career, make as much money as someone in banking, but you won't burn out. You have like an actual life. You can go out, you can talk to other people. It's not just, analytics 24 hours a day and just spinning out charts. So interviewed, got the job, accepted the job. And because I'd taken Arabic classes, they said, well, we have an offer.
Beep, back it up there. Oh, because you took Arabic classes?
This is what I tell most people. If you want your children to do something, don't encourage them to do it. They will do the opposite. So my mother and father said, oh, you need to take a foreign language class, Ashley, that you can use and transfer. And I'm in Texas, so the obvious choice would be Spanish. But because they gave me that as advice, I was just like, I'm going to take this Arabic class. I appreciate that thought. And didn't know enough to be dangerous. And when I applied to AIG, they actually had an opening at the time in Dubai. And my dad was just like, okay, are you actually going to go to Dubai? And I was like, well, you wanted me to get a job. I got one. You didn't say a location.
What every violinist young lady from Dallas dreams of doing is moving to Dubai.
Exactly. So I was lucky enough. I spent almost 5 years with AIG MENA and ended up doing TOEFL insurance and still very good friends with my boss to this day.
And MENA meaning you covered from Dubai, Middle East and North Africa?
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
And do you travel around the region a lot?
Yes, I did. I was able to go to, I spent time in Saudi. I spent time in, Tangiers. Oman. I went to some of, quite honestly, places that I would have never actually dreamt of going to, being that I am from Dallas, right? Like, it's just not something that someone's like, oh, next week I have to go to Oman. And my dad's just like, okay, let me pull out the atlas here. And figure out where you're going. But yes, I traveled all over the region, did TOEFL insurance, which is the Islamic Sharia compliant part of AIG's business, which unfortunately a lot of the companies actually no longer invest in. But I did that for almost 5 years before moving back to the States. And was helped by my boss to actually start my business. So
I want to interrupt you there because AIG, you can't think of AIG, at least if you're my age or anything over 50 years old, 40 years old, without thinking of Mr. Greenberg. And you told me that you actually had a chance to meet him and get some good counsel from him.
Yes. Actually, when I was actually profiled at one point in the New York Times, I actually took a photo in the Star offices while Mr. Greenberg was there. So I'm sure most people know about his love relationship with the New York Times. The fact that he even allowed that to happen is quite a testament to his like of me. But yes, when I started my business, he was so generous with his time. He and Chuck D'Angelo, who he worked with for years when he was with AIG and then at Star, and they helped me develop policies for 2 of my niches. And Star for a really long time was my capacity. And he was just basically like a lot of people will tell you no.
So let's give some definition there. So you're planning to start your own business, and to be in a broking business, you need someone who's going to underwrite the things that you do, especially when you start in the specialty areas that you did. So when you said they were your capacity, Greenberg and AIG agreed to be your underwriter for the business you'd write.
Yes.
So provider of insurance.
Correct. It was Star actually. So at that point he was at Star. But yes, they actually they were the underwriters for my fertility business. And quite honestly, without them, I would have not been able to grow the business at the clip that I was able to grow it, because I was a fairly new business. But with the backing of someone like Star, which is effectively at the point that was AIG, it gave me credibility right out the gate. So I am very fortunate that he saw enough in me to do that.
Interesting things going on there. First of all, you got, AIG, I had probably 100,000 people or more in it at the time. And yet you got a chance to meet the famous Mr. Greenberg, who is an amazing man. I've had a chance to meet him once or twice, or maybe 3 times myself, and felt like in the presence of somebody very special. Interesting, but very special. And but the lesson there is, because you said, I'm going to be returning to the U.S. and I'm going out on my own. It wasn't, okay, let's sever the relationship here. It's, well, how can we continue to work together in your new capacity? Now he transitioned over to Star. He had both Star and AIG. After the AIG troubles, he focused all his attention on Star. And yet he said, let's find a way to continue a relationship. What are you going to go do? How can we make it good for the both of us? And indeed, it was for you, right?
Yes. I really credit the start of my business to AIG and Hank and my former boss, Ayman Al-Jahimi, who is back in Bahrain. So without their help, they effectively gave me credibility day one, with the backing of Star and AIG.
But I think there's some great lessons in there, Ashley, which is being transparent about your plans, being conscious of the brand and the relationships you build every step of your life, and of course your career. Having Ayman be not only a boss but a mentor, going to them and saying in very candid ways, "Here's my plans for the future." Transparency. It's a lesson in how to do things the right way, and how to do it in a way that you never burn a bridge. You only build a bridge. And you create opportunities for those relationships to be portable across the lines of the change in your career and your status. So now you returned to Texas to build this business from Dubai.
I did, because if you're going to start a business in fertility, you have to go back to Texas.
But take us to that story. How do you focus on the 2 areas that you focus on that I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong? Your cyber risk, particularly for middle market companies, and ensuring the risk of this whole fertility world. When I say fertility world, the clinics, the different professional providers of services, medical services, counseling services, et al., that help people who are looking to have a child and are having a difficulty on their path. So how do you pick the 2 specialties?
You seek a lot of counsel. So I was actually, with obviously AIG, we were not insuring smaller businesses, right? Which meant I was actually dealing with the Willises and the Aons and the Marshes of the world. But when you're starting out, you're not going to be able to get that business because they are doing business, with the alpha houses. So I had a mentor that was with ACE, now Chubb, and she basically led me in the direction of professional liability, but more importantly, industries that were in growth places, where if you're a larger broker, you're not going to focus on business that hasn't really had a track record. So that one of the reasons why I did need Star's help was because the policies, quite frankly, did not exist in the States. They were doing it in London. They were writing it out of Lloyd's. But just carriers that are domiciled in the States, they actually had no appetite for that kind of business. So I just kind of started meeting with the physicians, your reproductive endocrinologist. I was starting to meet with the surrogacy facilities, IVF clinics, and just kind of trying to figure out what kind of insurance they needed. It was lucky my mother was a nurse, so she understood the clinical side. So she would plug in the holes to where it didn't make sense or where they were just speaking way over my head. And then that way I was able to articulate it to the carriers, because quite honestly, they didn't understand it either. So you're right. It's kind of one of those things where it takes a relationship. So it took a relationship on that side with the clinicians to get their trust, so that they were able to actually give me the information I needed so that I could present that to the carriers. And because I had their trust, and they were willing to actually entertain these risks.
A couple of lessons I heard in your recounting how that got started, Ashley, and the lessons are: One is mentorship has been something that's been important in your life. The other is I noticed that you're a woman and you work in a world where there are few women, and you've chosen to turn that to an advantage rather than let it be a disadvantage. And seems like there's a special sorority of women in that industry because you are few in number or had been few in number. And that creates a specialness in terms of the potential for the relationship and the collaboration that might exist. And finally, the other thing I hear you say is that you chose to zig while everyone else zagged. You picked areas where there wasn't a lot of focus, wasn't a lot of attention. It wasn't easy. It wasn't blueprinted. You had to sort of invent it along the way. And I think those are three mighty important lessons that I've heard from you over the couple of years now that we know one another. And I think it's important lessons. And frankly, I've told your story to other women in my life because I think it's so important. I hold you up as someone who's taken advantage of your disadvantages to create a terrific life and career path. So you set up with cyber, you set up with the whole fertility world. What comes next?
I think it's reinsurance because I think that as we move away from traditional work, traditional how we interact with each other, we're embracing the ability to work with people and not travel to go see them. We're embracing working out remotely with friends outside. So I think what I'm looking for as we move forward is to try to find coverage for the new ways that we work, the new ways that we work out or interact with friends. We're now living in the world where we're on demand. We want things immediately dropped off at our house. Or if we're going to the office, we want it immediately dropped off at the office before we leave to go home. So I think now what I'm looking at is how we look into the alternative markets, insurance markets, so that we can create insurance products for those on-demand needs that we have currently become used to, quite honestly, because of COVID.
And that changes the risk of the companies providing those services. And that's where you, from a risk management hat on, say, it's going to create different risks for them, different risk profiles. So they're going to need balance sheet protection for those new risks. And my job as a professional in the field is to go to find out, okay, how do I define those risks? How do we manage them? And how do we lay off the exposure to that to insurance companies? But then we come around to those insurance companies only want to take so much of that risk per company, per category on their own balance sheet. And then there's this world of reinsurance. So explain to us what reinsurance is.
Well, quite simply, it's the insurance company to the insurance company. So it's where the insurance companies are able to offload some of their risk to someone else. And it helps make sure that there's liquidity between, the insurance company and the reinsurance company. So it's that fine dance to make sure that everyone maintains solvency and they're able to pay claims. Quite honestly, we're worried more about the catastrophic claims, right? We're worried about the next breach that will take down another pipeline. So it's to make sure that insurance companies have enough capital to pay out those catastrophic claims as they present themselves.
So in layman's terms, you write an insurance policy for a company in Colorado, and you're managing their cyber risk, and you write a policy that gives them $10 million worth of coverage. Now, let's say Star is your underwriter that you take that to. They say, okay, we'll underwrite that. But now they're doing that for a number of brokers. And now their book has $100 million worth of risk in the cyber area, in the geographies that you're covering. And their risk managers say, okay, we have a balance sheet and we have risk categories against that. One of them being this $100 million worth of cyber risk that came in through Ashley's company. And that's too much for us to have exposure. So we'll keep the first 50 million of exposure, and we'll ask Ashley's reinsurance company to help us lay off that other 50 to 5 different reinsurers so that we all are properly capitalized. If a claim came in of an enormous size, because it's spread across those several balance sheets, we're all in a position to pay our claims, and the liquidity is there, and life goes on.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I'm trying to guess my way through it. You actually know it because you just set up a reinsurance company. Tell us about it. What's it called?
Oh, well, actually, it's just my name. I am Jim. This is the problem. I am absolutely the most uncreative person when it comes to insurance, naming insurance company.
So what's it called?
It's just A Hunter and Company. It is legitimately the most boring name on earth. But they say most entrepreneurs are narcissists. Right. So there's that.
So A Hunter and Company is a reinsurance company. And there are only a couple of places that you would set that company up or domicile it. And for a while, I know you were looking at Bermuda. Bermuda has become an insurance capital. They've written their laws and their requirements there to be attractive, particularly in a reinsurance world. But you had a choice between there and Delaware, I think it was, and you decided on Delaware?
Yes. And mainly because Delaware is also a major player, right? Delaware is the third largest player in this space, behind obviously Bermuda and Cayman. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to get to Delaware.
Yep. And have an infrastructure with a court system and a professional services industry that knows how to work with these reinsurers. And will your reinsurance company have a focus area?
Yes, hopefully it will stay in what I know best, right? I think if it's not broke, don't fix it. So cyber is good. And there's a need for cyber, as you, I'm sure, are aware. Cyber has become a sticking point for a lot of companies, a lot of directors, and they're looking for ways to find alternative ways to cover that cyber risk. So yes, cyber, professional liability, and management liability, that's pretty much our focus.
Got it. Now, along the way, you not only did you pick up the piano while you were studying violin and decided I'm going to take this Arabic class, but I think you've also picked up another language along the way.
It's Swedish.
Well, that would have been everybody's guess that, of course, the next thing will be Swedish, but there's a reason for that.
Well, I had to pick up Swedish. My husband is Swede, so.
Now, did that come easily to you?
Well, it's interesting. Swedish, because it's a Germanic language, a lot of the words as English speakers, we would understand. I think it's the grammatical structure that has always been an issue for me. So I would understand what he would say, but grammatically, my structure probably sounds like, and he says this, it's just easier if I respond back in English. I understand what he's saying. It's probably just easier if I respond back.
Now, I know because I've chatted with you a couple of times while you were visiting with your husband and his family in Sweden. How much time are you guys spending in Sweden now? I know COVID obviously had an influence on where you'd spend your time, but what's your experience been there?
Actually, travel, as I'm sure a lot of us are starting to realize, it's still a bit hard. It's a bit cumbersome finding, flights in and out of Europe. But we're spending now once a month there. I mean, this, my husband owns a business in Sweden. So we're there at least once a month for his business. And I actually have clients also that are domiciled in Sweden. So I'm hopeful that as travel starts to loosen up and hopefully, by the middle of November, it'll be easier to get in and out of Europe. But yes, I love Sweden. And
your husband's in the real estate business.
Yes, he's in the real estate business. So, and that's a business that I know nothing about.
I don't believe that. And do you tell me about when you spend time in Sweden? How do you enjoy that?
I love Scandinavia. He knows that I love Scandinavia. And they're very, very kind to an American who bungles their language, but it's just very genuinely interested in the culture. But it's lovely. It's a nice time. I mean, it's a when the weather is too unbearable in Texas, You can always flee to the nice, cooler climate of Sweden.
Uh-huh.
And so it's nice. It's
Now,
lovely.
have you gone to the islands in the summertime?
I've been, yes, to the archipelago. Yes, a couple of times. Yes, Frederick, my husband, he's very good about making sure that I see all that is wonderful about Sweden. He is a good host of Sweden.
Does his family have a place in the archipelago?
No, they do not. They're all city dwellers, unfortunately.
But it seems like so many people have a summer place that they flee to, and I think there are literally thousands of islands.
Yes, thousands of islands. And to your point, I mean, the moment the summer hits, you will not find one single soul in the middle of Göteborg or Stockholm. They are all in the summer house.
Yeah. So that sounds like a great adventure, but that's quite a bit of travel monthly to Sweden. And I know
Yes.
you New York regularly, obviously now Delaware.
Yeah, it's a beating. I mean, Jim, I get facials.
It's working. Now, how did you and Frederick meet?
Actually, he was in the wine business for a very long time, and I like wine.
And you're a wino.
So I was lucky. He was in the wine business. We just knew each other mutually through friends. And then, yeah, time was right. We happened to be at the same place at the same time, available, and the rest is history. Yeah, that was, yeah. He is the love of my life. He is the sweetest man on the planet.
No, he's the Swedish man.
He is the sweetest
man. I happen to have met him the last time you were in New York. You, Alice, and Frederick and I got together, and it was great to finally meet this saint of a man.
Yeah, to put up with me, you are a saint. Okay.
One of the things that we've been writing about as you know, I write a letter every Sunday. We call it the Celebrations Pulse. And I have some recurring themes that I come back to, and I'd like to ask you about some of them, because it seems to me that, and we shouldn't presume to know, but I do, that you have not had an issue with the things that I'm concerned about that so many people I know and are in our community have. One thing I have not written about much, but want to more, and maybe you can help us think about it, is, I'm a lot older than you, and my wife and I have been chatting a lot about, we live in the New York area, Long Island. We not too long ago got a condo down in Florida. During COVID, we spent 7 or 8 weeks down there, which is the first time we spent any time down in Florida. And I never thought I could or wanted to work remotely, but lo and behold, we learned we could, and that was a nice break. But so many of our friends are making the decision, especially accelerated, I think, a bit by COVID, to say, do I really need to have a place up north and a place up? So family's going to influence that, whether or not you're working and what your career situation is going to influence that. But Mary Lou and I have had the conversation, and we have to be very conscious of managing adult friendships. You say, wait a minute, all these wonderful people that we're very close to are saying, we're selling a place up north, we're going to be full-time Florida residents. Well, that impacts, our friendships, our social life, our sense of community. And so adult friendships is the headline, the topic that I'm writing about it. And people don't think you can develop new friends as you get older, that your circle is going to shrink because you're really not adding to it. You're obviously 100 years younger than I am, but how do you and Frederick think about friendships? And is that something you think about deliberately, how you maintain them, especially with an international travel lifestyle that the two of you lead? How do you manage that?
It's funny, actually, because you wrote about the relationship calendar in one of your posts. And relationships are a huge, huge thing for me. I am someone that, as I've gotten older, it's easier to maintain adult relationships, and it's something that I consciously do.
You're conscious of maintaining and developing those.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's important, because I think as I just progress personally and professionally. I feel like my relationships now are much more important to me now than they were maybe, let's say, 10 years ago. And I'm just aware of how my relationships affect my actual global place in the world, as we, maybe would say, or just your mental health. I mean, it is just nice to be able to pick up the phone and a friend actually pick up the other side, and you can just pick up where you left off. So yes.
What tools do you use to stay connected?
Oh, this is okay. So I have two different tools. I like the old antiquated way of I will write down every week of someone I want to actually talk to that week. And then monthly, I have a list monthly where I just put it in my Outlook calendar, like make sure I email like this mentor this month or that mentor. So I want to, and my mentors have actually turned into friends, obviously. I mean, you included, I would put that in, and I just quite honestly love your company. So, I do make a point. Like if I'm in New York, I will reach out to New York people. Or if I'm in Stockholm, I will reach out to Stockholm people. And I do that monthly. And from the Outlook calendar and just simply writing it down in my journal.
Mm-hmm. And when you're in Stockholm, do you try and convene groups of friends there so that you're keeping those relationships fresh?
Yes. Frederick will tell you I will send emails out weeks in advance.
Good.
to meet with friends for drinks or just to catch up, or clients, because your clients are busy as well, right? Like they're moving, they're transporting between here and there, and I just think it's nice because I think that people they like connection. We're human, we like connection. We want to see people, we want to have a drink, we want to have a coffee, we want to know what's going on with your dog, or whatever the case may be, like whatever passion you have that month. So Frederick is trying. Frederick is, he's trying. I'm from the South. We love to invite.
He's a little bit more stoic.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, I'm like, oh, everyone come over. Come visit. I want you to come visit. I like to host parties. I'm getting him out of his shell, so he likes to show up to these parties. So. Yeah. But for me, friendships, and especially girlfriends that are kind of in the same position that I'm in, where, we're kind of in the same path as far as professionally concerned. We're thinking about trying to get on corporate boards. We're thinking about what it looks like, 10 years from now in our business, or, are we going to run this company, put our name up for CEO, or whatever the case may be. So it also is just really good to have, because it's a nice sounding board. And if you don't have friends, then you don't have anyone to bounce even those most ridiculous ideas off of, so they can tell you, that's crazy, don't do that.
I remember someone telling you what areas of insurance to go in and what areas not to go in.
Yes. And thank God Pam told me that, because I would have been struggling still trying to insure construction. So.
Well, that's a case of you turning your disadvantages into advantages.
Yes, thank you.
I would guess that without asking you to name anybody, but I bet you've made friends traveling.
It's funny you say that. Yes, I one time met a client that I have insured for the last 10 years on a flight from Dubai to Atlanta, and we're still friends.
That is a long flight.
We had a lot to discuss, and at the end, he was just like, I need excess coverage, and I was just like, okay. So yes, the travel buddies are the fun buddies.
That's I always tell people that I do not speak to the person next to me other than to say hello on flights. But just as I'm asking you the question, I'm answering it in my own head. I have 5 good friends that I met because we sat next to one another on a plane. Maybe it's even more than 5. But as a rule, I don't speak to the person next to me. But sometimes I'll loosen up on the descent.
Yes. You never know what you get on a flight. Yes, I like flight buddies, and now I can say I like COVID buddies. So.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you one time before, but since the beginning of COVID, we formed what we call a connection council here. And there are three, increasing now in number, but at the moment, three are the most eminent, capable psychologists in the world. And I still have never met any of them in person, but I feel very close to all three of our current members of the our Connectivity Council. And these are people who we use to advise us and get ideas from to share with our community about what kids will be experiencing going back to school this just recently when schools reopened, and dealing with loss and all the things that we go to them for. But I've never met them in person, but they're three of the most amazing and wonderful people. And two of them I met because they wrote something that I just thought was so fantastic that I couldn't put it down. I had to share it with everybody. And then finally I said, duh, I ought to tell them how wonderful I thought their work was. And I sent notes to each of them, and each of them followed up saying, why don't we chat? And that's Dr. Dan Willingham from the University of Virginia and Dr. George Everly from Baltimore. He's at the Johns Hopkins School, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and these are two remarkable guys. And the third was a friend of a friend referral, Dr. Chloe. Dr. Chloe Carmichael has a great book out now all about how to turn anxiety from a negative into a positive. But these are extraordinary people that I've had a chance with. So I'm thankful in some ways for the good things that came from COVID. Now, let's face it, there's so many bad things.
Yeah.
And so many horrible things for families and people who've been impacted, and the economic devastation that it's yielded. But there are a few bright spots. Getting to know you was a bright spot, but getting to know the three people I just mentioned from our Connectivity Council. So I'm one of the things I value is the friendship you and I have developed. I know I have a half a dozen people who are asking me to introduce you to them because they're seeking great board members, great board contributors, and you'd be a great contributor almost to any board in any industry. And so I got to fight them off with a whip and a chair to make sure we sequence them properly for you. But I'm very, very appreciative of the relationship we've developed, of the good laughs that we've had, getting to know you. I'm glad we finally got to meet in person. I think we'll get to do that again soon. And so there are bright spots and even disasters like COVID, and you're that bright spot for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, I share the same feelings.
Well, Ashley Hunter, you bring so much to the table. Accomplished businesswoman, entrepreneur, musician, family member, friend extraordinaire, and in so many ways, you're going to be a thoughtful leader in business and in the entrepreneurial community. So thanks for spending your time with us today, Ashley.
Oh, thank you.
That was Ashley Hunter joining us here on Celebrations Chatter. It's so much fun to see how Jim and Ashley have formed this great relationship, especially given that they first met virtually. Ashley's story inspires us on the ability to pursue her passions and interests and be successful in all of them, whether it's the business world, in the classroom, or on the symphony stage. She's a modern Renaissance woman. If you want to learn more about Ashley and the work she's doing, please visit www.ahunterco.com.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.